It's a very cold autumn day. Halloween, our scariest time of the year, the festival we all love. What's it all about? Do you ever wonder where it all comes from? Look at these wonderful pumpkins. Where did they come from? The cats, the witches, the bats, the vampires, the werewolves, the ghosts, the scary stories. Let's find out, shall we?
Pumpkins are such a big part of Halloween. In the 19th century, they were called jack-o'-lanterns, a tradition started by the Irish. The Irish immigrants carried on the tradition when they went to America. Jack-o'-lanterns were made from turnips, and they were rather scary and quite sinister to scare off the evil spirits.
Halloween means All Hallowed. It goes back to Celtic times. It was a pagan festival which they used to celebrate. They used to believe that the veil between the two worlds, between the 31st and the 1st of November, was at its thinnest. And this is when the spirits were around them more than ever, and those that had passed that year could go on into the other world. It was a very good time of year because it's when they brought the harvest in. Some of the harvest was given as offerings for the wandering spirits. The other thing they used to do was guising, which was dressing up in costumes. This, they believed, would stop the spirits from seeing them. As they were disguised, the spirits could not see them. Lots of food was eaten. They would tie apples to evergreen branches, and it was a big, long festival.
In Celtic times, it was called Samhain, and when the Romans came over here, the two traditions became mingled. As with many spectacles and traditions of the modern age, much of which we celebrate today derives from myths and history of the classic world. Feralia was the Roman festival, which was passing of the dead, where they would honour their dead.
Apple trees. We think of apple bobbing, but that goes way back. The Romans brought the apple trees over when they invaded us.
The Roman goddess Pomona was the goddess of fruit and trees. Her symbol was the apple. The Romans would have an actual day to honour Pomona. Apple bobbing is an old favourite at Halloween. One tradition was a young girl would say out loud the name of the one she desired. And if she bit the apple on the first attempt, this would be a match made in heaven. If she did it on the second attempt, this was still a good match. But if it took 3 attempts to bite into the apple, this would not be a good match. Apples were also suspended from the ceiling by string or ribbon, called snap apple, and the first to bite the apple would be the first one to marry. Nowadays, the Halloween costumes aren't really that scary, but our ancestors wore really scary costumes. It was mainly for the poor people. They made their own costumes and went door to door, reading poems and singing songs. They got food and they got money. And in return, they would say prayers for the loved ones that had passed. The ancient Greeks believed that if you were virtuous during your life, then once a year, once you were dead, you could come back to earth again. In the Greek classics, there are plenty of stories that are connected to the underworld and ghostly stories. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus is seen here arriving in the underworld. For thousands of years, long before we were putting pumpkins and scary things in our gardens on Halloween, the Romans were telling lots of ghostly stories. The ancient Romans were very good at scary stories. A great example of the classics is Virgil's epic poem, The Aeneid, a great work full of tales of the underworld. Souls on the bank of Acheron. Here we see the newly dead hovering on the bank of Hakaron, the lower world which they must cross in Charon's boat to reach the ultimate destination.
Yew trees are very resilient, and the big old trees, as the drooping branches come down, when they reach the ground, they reroot themselves and become their own little trunks and grow and support the tree. This is how the yew trees become associated with the underworld, death and rebirth. So it's not surprising these wonderful stories that emerge with such magnificent trees.
The yew tree was also sacred to the Greek goddess Hecate, who is associated with witchcraft, necromancy and death. And the yew has been used for thousands of years for rituals, for purification and to ward off evil spirits. The sacred yew tree, the guardian of the churchyard, is the perfect Halloween tree. Halloween was not always about Fright Night. A century ago, Halloween was completely different. It was more about romance and playing games and fortune telling. There were love rituals. Newspapers recommended parlour games that promised to reveal romantic fortune. There was Nutcrack Night. Place 2 chestnuts on the fire. If they went close together and burned brightly, romance was in the air. But if they cracked and popped, it was not a good match. Young girls would throw apple peeling over their shoulder to see what letter it would make when it landed on the ground. It's a misty Halloween, just before dusk. Night is about to fall. The veil between the worlds is opening, and the spirits of the dead are awakening, entering our world. The melodic lullaby that sounds so sweet and enchanting. Do not follow the sound, even though it makes you feel so good. Cover your ears and head home as quickly as you can. The girl you see before you dancing around the trees, singing loudly, beckoning you to come nearer. No, get home, because this is no girl. It's a nymph from the underworld. Bats were believed to be the messengers of the devil himself. It was also believed witches used bat blood in their flying concoctions. Bat superstition is a very wide superstition, and there are so many stories. The scary werewolves. Some scholars believe they made their debut in the Epic of Gilgamesh, but also in Greek mythology, the legend of Lycaon. In Celtic mythology, the cat Seth stole the souls of the recently deceased. They also believed that the devil turned people that were bad into black cats, and the devil was always nearby if a black cat came along. The Mexican Day of the Dead, a day to honour the lives of dead family members and friends. However you are going to celebrate, happy Halloween!